Peace and wellness, everyone. It's Takesha of Native Nubian Wellness, and you are tuning into another session of Black Women Who Blaze. Today, I have a special guest with me, another sister blazing trails in the industry, and I appreciate your time, Tamika McPhail. Um, would you like to introduce yourself to the platform?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tamika McPhail. I am from the state of Connecticut. I am the state director for minorities for medical marijuana here in the state of Connecticut. I'm also the program manager for the new Social Equity Accelerator, being powered by the state. And I've been a 3 decades advocate and consumer of cannabis.
Thank you, thank you. So yeah, I wanted to have you on the platform. We connected really through the accelerator. You reached out to me about participating, and I was so grateful for the opportunity. So I came on as one of your head coaches, and so getting to know you during that time, and hearing your story, I felt like it definitely was one that needs to be shared on the platform. So again, I appreciate it. And so you said yes, you live here in Connecticut. You were born and raised here. Okay.
Yeah, I was born and raised Bridgeport, Connecticut. Been here my whole life. Um, own my home here, own my business here. Probably never gonna leave. I love Bridgeport. I love Connecticut. And my town, growing up, it was like a little mini Detroit. We had a lot of um, factories and the hustle and bustle. And maybe about 20 years ago, our school system started to fail, and we just really started to see a severe decline of the city. And so I think I stick around because I want to be part of the change. I want to be part of the restoration of the city.
Oh wow, wow, yeah. And I think that that's if you've grown up in an urban area, heavily populated by people of color, black people, and everyone else, we've seen that. We've seen robust towns and neighborhoods and communities that had black owned businesses and homeowners. And like you said, we've seen a decline in those areas. And have a lot of it has to do with obviously racism and white supremacy, but that also includes the war on drugs, right? And and this platform is about black women who blaze in cannabis, and outside, of course, but in the space, in the community. And so what is your journey or connection with the plant? How did that begin? And then you can get into the story with prohibition and seeing a direct effect of the war on drugs in your own family.
Yeah. So um, I actually became a consumer really young. Um, the year I graduated from the DARE program, it was the summer I graduated from the DARE program. I had won the mayor's initiative for the essay that I wrote about why just say no. My just say no essay won the mayor's award. And my neighbor, he said, "Hey, can you come here for a minute?" I'm like, "Yeah." I'm probably about 10. He's maybe about 14, 15. So I go to see what he wants. And his father was a grower. And what he wanted was, because I was short, he wanted me to get under this space and grab a plant. I didn't know what the plant was. No big, my grandmother loved plants. No big deal. I go under the space, I grab the plant, and he breaks me off this big ass bud. Now, I didn't want to look like, a nerd. I had to act like I knew what this was. I was with it. And so that was how I smoked my first joint. Like we took it right off. Again, didn't know what the hell we were doing. Took it right off the plant, broke it down, rolled it up, smoked my first joint. And then he gives me like two big handfuls of buds. And he's like, here, that's for taking the plant. And so that's where my love for the consumption of the plant came from. I had a really tumultuous childhood. And I found that when I consumed cannabis, I didn't have that stress. I didn't have that. I felt like a kid, right? I didn't have a bunch of cares and all of that stuff. And I instantly fell in love with that plant. And
Mhm.
that was scary for me because I had been being taught that this was a drug. And it's like, oh my God, I'm on drugs. I'm addicted to drugs. So fast forward maybe a year, it probably wasn't that long. One of my uncles found out that I consumed, and he said, you're going to do it. And I just want to make sure that you have clean weed, you know where it's coming from, and that you never have to ask anybody
Mhm.
for weed. And he took me to the old Rastas. And that is where I really developed a real love and connection and respect for cannabis. Because I was always under the impression, we know now it's a fact that I was taking medicine,
Mhm.
right? The older Rastas, that's what it was. It was ganja, it's medicine.
Right.
And they stood by that and they believed in it. And it wasn't having a conversation with them. It wasn't just them saying it because they wanted to have an excuse to smoke weed. They really believed
Mhm.
that this herb was healing.
Right.
And so I would get these weekly sessions with the old Rastas, and they really would just teach me about the history of the plant and how it was used for medicine. And that was dope. I had this little secret knowledge, of this plant that I had because you couldn't talk about this with other people. And at the time, I'm not even 15 years old, so I damn sure can't talk to my friends about it.
Right.
And so it was just this little world that lived inside my head, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved um, what it did for me, and I loved just caring for this plant that was, as much as I care for it, it was caring for me, right? It's probably the first relationship where I felt like I was getting as much as I was given.
Wow.
And that's probably weird, but
No, understand.
cannabis gave a lot to me. A lot of kids that I grew up with are no longer here,
Mhm.
um, for one reason or another.
Right.
So I'm forever grateful to cannabis because I know that, and all of the stuff that I saw growing up, all of the stuff that I went through growing up, I
Mhm.
know that cannabis was that thing that kept me level.
Right. Right. Wow. Wow. That's definitely very different and unexpected, than other stories. I mean, I heard some stories of my dad, he always, I've been smoking since I was 8 years old.
Well, I saw my parents, right? They would be, my father had this beautiful Cadillac, and they would be in the front seat, and my mom would give my dad a shotgun, and I would be like, what are they doing? That is so cool. I want to do that one day. And I had no idea, the whole how my journey would envelop, but I just knew that one day I wanted to participate in a shotgun because that was so freaking cool. I thought my mother was badass because she always had the fire side in her mouth. So I was like, yo,
My
my mother
God.
is in jail. I got that. And so not even knowing that it was like weed or whatever, I didn't know. But once I did, that was like one of my first, I was like, I cannot wait to find somebody that I could do a shotgun with.
Oh my
And it
goodness.
was, just that I've always had a love and a curiosity for weed.
Mhm.
And once I had the opportunity to experience it, not only I think my journey is different because I didn't experience the plant on my own, right? I had adults around me that were really intentional about making sure that I wasn't abusive to the plant.
Hmm.
And so I think it made my journey different. Even as a young person, I had a tremendous amount of respect for cannabis.
Wow, wow. And now with it medicinally accessible and some adult use, right? We know that there are some children who have to consume the plant as medicine, and they are getting supervised, and they're getting it from their parents because of a condition, but what people don't understand, because they don't come from urban areas that have been destroyed by, racism, oppression, suppression, Jim Crow era, and obviously the war on drugs and all of those things, redlining and all of that. The trauma that the children who are born into these poverty-stricken areas, we suffer from PTSD, intergenerational, but then also from what we have to see in our own neighborhoods. And as opposed to turning to medications that may come from some a professional psychiatrist, counselor, whoever prescribes it, that they prescribe now, we went to a plant, that we might have seen, like you said, our parents consume, and they still here, alive and well, and so we may not have known, like you said, all the ins and outs until you actually got the direction from the Rastafari community, who has been, like you said, for decades, if not centuries, been teaching the ancient ways of this medicinal plant. And no, they may not have all the scientific language that is used and all the jargon and all that now, but they understood what the plant does, like any herb, an herbalist or people who are in tune with nature would understand. And so they were the ones, the keepers of that knowledge, and they shared that within our communities. That's who I remember seeing consume openly, always had it on them, and were pillars in our communities, because they not only spoke to that plant, but also eating healthy and moving your body, and just being not of the system. You may be a part in it, but not of the system in those ways. So kudos to you for getting that type of guidance early on. E- you know Even though, hey, we're not saying now that that's something a child would do, but this was a part of your journey, so thank you for being
Right. No, I would not. I'm a mom of six. I would not sit any of my 10-year-old children down. And
right.
um, well, and it depends. What are they dealing with? I was a 10-year-old child who was suffering, surviving some serious stuff, like you said, urban trauma.
Yes.
Um, and there's a myriad of things I could have done. Cannabis, I believe, was a direct gift from God. I was at a point where I could have went anywhere in life, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but I was not friends with these young men. We were neighbors, but we weren't friends. They were older than me. Why me? Why did they pick me to pull the plant out?
Right.
I truly believe with everything I am that that was God's gift to me. That was God's grace for me.
Right.
That I didn't go out and find another substance. I grew up with a heroin addicted father, right? Um, and so I could have very well slipped in to a different type of substance abuse, or a
Listen,
different into substance abuse. Let me not say different. I
let me
could have slipped into substance abuse.
speak.
I could have become an alcoholic. I did battle alcoholism at a very, very young age. Um, the one steady in my life always was cannabis.
Mhm.
That was when everything was chaotic. That was the one thing that centered everything was cannabis. And I was too young to explain it. I could not explain it to people. I could
Right.
not explain um how this plant was helping me. I could not explain it because then you would have to explain mental health issues, which we don't talk about, right? And we're talking about 30 some years ago. I
Mhm.
could not go to my parents and tell them I thought I was depressed. PTS, what? Girl, you been in the army? Like, right? That
Mhm.
we didn't have those conversations. And so I always felt like cannabis was God's gift to me. Like God said, little girl, I'm gonna give you something that's gonna get you through. Just hold on and have faith. And I did. I have faith in that plant, and I have never ever. I started consuming at 10 years old. I've never consumed another substance in my life. I've never had the desire to
Right.
consume another substance in my life. Cannabis has always been it. I got a headache. I'm gonna go smoke a blunt. My stomach hurt. I
Mhm.
gotta go smoke a blunt. I have a different strain that I use, for different things, but that is my medicine. Just
Right.
like you run and go get a Motrin, I have a strain that I'm gonna get that's gonna help me with
Right.
this muscle spasm. I have something that's gonna help me with this headache. I have something that's gonna help me with my appetite. Like that's my medicine. And
Right.
it is just beautiful to be at this point in cannabis. I wish we were so much farther, but to be at this point in cannabis, I remember when the Chronic came out, right?
Mm.
I'm a lover of hip hop, but I'm an East Coast girl, right? So New York hip hop was hip hop to me. And I really wasn't open minded about hearing West Coast or anything else. But they came out with this album called The Chronic, and I knew what they was talking about. Now everybody didn't know what The Chronic was, but I knew what The Chronic was. And it was just being able to connect, right? I didn't know Dre, I ain't know Snoop, I ain't know none of them, but they know me. We know each other.
Right.
And that was like other people feel this way about cannabis. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I'm on to something. And so, I've never been apologetic about my love for cannabis. Once they came out with the Chronic, I knew we was on to something, we was going to show the world at some point. And here we are, here we are showing the world that this is not a drug. This is a medicine. It's safer than your Tylenol.
Mhm.
It's safer than your Motrin. It's safer than your prescription. Um, this is medicine, and it's okay to use herbal medicine, right?
Right.
We tell people all the time to drink herbal tea for this, and what's the difference? What's the difference of some mullein and some cannabis?
Mhm.
You drink a beer to relax. Hops, it's
Mhm.
cannabis. That's cannabis's little cousin.
Mhm.
So, I think the more that we educate folks, right, and just how, like I said, people don't even realize that hops and cannabis are the same family. Like that's
Right.
cannabis's cousin. Do you
Right.
realize that? And people don't. And so when you're able to talk about cannabis in that way, right, people are intrigued. Oh, you don't say. And now we can have a conversation and we can start to kind of take some of that stigma and the mystery out of cannabis, and have the conversations. Um, I remember coming out of my cannabis closet, you know, um, to my family knew that I consumed. Everybody in my family knew I consumed. My children knew I consumed. We didn't talk about what I was consuming, but they knew that, mommy had her medicine. And one day my son came home at 10 years old from his DARE program. And he said, Mommy, I know that you smoke crack and it's okay. I love you.
Oh, God.
And I was like, what the? And so we had to have
Wow.
a serious conversation that mommy does not smoke crack. I smoke cannabis. And telling them what cannabis was. And I had to have this conversation with children. Um, and then trying to have those conversations with adults. It wasn't always easy. People just thought I was a stoner, and they really didn't get how cannabis was saving my life. Like,
Right.
it literally was.
So we had to take a little pause and get everything together. We are,
Gotta
like
get it
you said,
together.
we are moms at home, with families. And yes, we get to talk about cannabis openly. And that's what you were just saying, how, you had to really explain to your son, the difference in medicine,
Yeah.
a manufactured substance that was put in our community to destroy it. No, it's two different things. And I don't consume crack, right? You said, I consume cannabis.
Yeah, it was really, and it was an eye opener, not only the conversation that we're having with our children, but just the conversation that society is having. And we're still in this place where we're telling people that one is the same thing as the other, and that's not the case. Right. And so I really wanted to, it actually opened up the door for us to have um, a really robust drug conversation. Right. And so I remember my kids asking me, well, you smoke weed. What happens when I get older and I want to smoke weed? Then, as long as you got all your shit together, that's fine.
Hmm.
But I don't want you to turn 21 and smoke crack. It's not the same.
Right.
The decision is not the same. And so I appreciated that experience, because we had a conversation that I don't know if maybe I probably would have relied on Dare, to give them the information. And it just showed me that that information is not good. Um, and it really needs to be changed. And we have to take control of the conversation and the narrative. Um, and then it also made me really nervous, because I'm not a person who tells my kids what happens in my house stays in my house. We're not those type of people. Um, that's a whole nother, but I'm not that type of person. Whatever I do, I do.
Right.
And I just don't like teaching kids to keep secrets,
Right.
right? It just opens up a whole nother Pandora's box. And so I feel like if I can't do it around my kid or with my kids' knowledge, then I probably shouldn't be doing it.
Hmm.
And so they've always known that I consume. Do I sit in a car and smoke blunts with them? No, but my kids know that I consume. They know, don't touch my stuff. Like they know.
Right.
Um, and I just appreciate that we're at that place. I have people who have cannabis business licenses, and their families don't know that they have cannabis businesses,
Yeah.
because they're still trying to work their way around the stigma. Um, but once I had the conversation, my children always knew, my family always knew, but it's also something that you kind of stand in the background and do, like you're not really. And I tried to always champion for my love for cannabis. But I think at that whole situation with my son, um, it really made me want to advocate more, right? And make this thing normal, right? Because we can't keep perpetuating, right? The stigmas and the stereotypes. And so I started to come out of my cannabis closet a little more and a little more and a little more. And at the time, that was just a really kind of tricky thing. You could still be arrested for buying Dutch Masters because they were considered drug paraphernalia.
Right.
Um, and so through all of that, I held on to, this is medication. This is medication. They got this wrong. And I'm going to take my medication.
Mhm.
And so my love for cannabis turned into just wanting everybody to love cannabis. I wanted everybody to, experience what I was experiencing. And again, the lesson that I got when my uncle would get his weekly allotment, these men were not drug dealers. These were not drug dealers. They lived in a home with their families, and there were no flashy clothes and no flashy cars, and this was medicine, right? And I swear to you, that's how I believed in my heart of hearts, that this was medicine. And I just wanted everybody to experience this medicine like I was. And so we started to sell cannabis. And again, this is medicine, right? And I had folks that were coming from upstate New York, because they were on chemo, and the cannabis helped them eat after their chemo. It kept them from being sick. And I never felt like I was doing anything wrong. I wasn't selling cannabis to kids or anything like that. We weren't in a gang. We weren't violent. Nothing crazy like that. It was people that were just like me. They went to work every day. They had families. And this was, instead of taking a psychotropic pill, they would rather smoke a blunt and relax.
Right.
They don't want to drink a half a bottle of whiskey. They rather smoke a half a blunt or a joint and relax. And so I'm not here to judge, because this is how I unwind. If you want to have a beer, go ahead, but I'm going to have a blunt.
Right.
And so 99% of my clientele was working people that have families and kids, and they wanted a safe place to buy weed. They didn't want to have to go into the hood. They didn't want to have somebody that they didn't know come into their house. We were, I'm not going to say the originators, but really pioneering in delivery. People didn't ride around with work, right? And we did, because I swear to you, I'm saying, and this is medicine. Who's going to bother me for a little bit of weed, right? And it starts to become an industry, right? It's not just weed and the weed man. It is becoming an industry out west. And High Times was in circulation. Again, you only had you could get a High Times at like a CD bodega, right, or at a record shop. It was very hard to find High Times, because again, that was considered paraphernalia in some states. And I'm reading the High Times because, I like to stay up. I'm reading the High Times, and that particular edition was about mandatory minimums for weed. I'm reading it saying, I'm in Connecticut. I ain't nothing to worry about. Well, I had a shit ton to worry about, because Connecticut had mandatory minimums like every state for weed. So I'm like, oh, whoa. I might have to rethink this, because I'm not going to jail.
Right.
And, I at the time, it was me and my younger brother. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to have to figure something out, because they have mandatory minimums for weed. And it was like, by amount, you got certain amount of years, by the amount that you had. And at this time, we doing pounds. And, I can openly talk about it now, because my brother has been arrested, convicted, served his time. And so this is not a secret or anything, but, we was moving pounds. And so I'm like, boy, this is like 10 years minimum. He's like, don't worry, nobody's going to bother us. It's medicine. And I have passed it's medicine on to my little brother. It's medicine. And again, we bothered nobody. We, I didn't have a bunch of foot traffic at my house. It's just crazy. A young man was arrested for something else. And he told them that, you should go to that house. They be selling a lot of weed. And put us under surveillance for like months. They were watching us. And nothing. They saw nothing because we don't have people coming to our house. They couldn't figure out like what's happening. Is this boy lying? Same boy comes over and is like, yo, my boy is in a pinch and he really need some weight. Something we would never, ever, ever, ever do. And my brother's like, all right, I'll have it ready tomorrow afternoon. And that day they raided my house, kicked our doors in, had guns drawn on my children.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And ultimately my brother was arrested
Mm-mm.
and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He served 8. When he originally went to jail, we didn't have early release. They had took away early release in Connecticut. So my brother was scheduled to do 85% of his time,
Mm.
even though it was a nonviolent offense. And so about 7.5 years into his sentence, we legalized medical, and the new governor said we're going to do early release for nonviolent criminals. So
Mm.
the same year we got medical legalization, my brother was eligible for parole for cannabis.
Mm.
Um, and at first I'm excited, right? I'm thinking, am I going to have to move to Colorado or California? Because I wanted this opportunity. Like we literally have given our lives. And
Yeah.
so I wanted this opportunity. And Connecticut releases, what it's going to take for you to get one of these medical licenses.
Mm-hmm.
And it infuriated me because one of the requirements was that you had to have $1 million liquidity in your bank account.
Mm. Mm.
Well,
Mm.
what? That was, you couldn't even apply if you couldn't prove that you had $1 million liquid in your bank account.
Wow. Mm-mm.
What? And so I watched all these jokers come into Connecticut and set up cannabis businesses, and there still wasn't a place for me.
Right.
And I've basically my whole life been an advocate. I started out with AmeriCorps and became a doula without even knowing it. And I've just been an advocate my whole life.
Right.
And so I started to research who are the people advocating in cannabis, that look like me. And I found M for MM, and we have been rocking an advocacy ever since. And we had our medical here, but there were other states that were getting ready to come online. And,
Right.
I learned a lot, going to these other states and fighting with other advocates to make sure that social equity has a place in the licensing process, and that it has an equitable place in the licensing process.
Right.
And so when we finally get to Connecticut legalizing, I'm like super pumped because I have knowledge, and there's a great group of people here in Connecticut, cannabis advocates, that have a shit ton of knowledge. Like there's no way that we are going to get this wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And social equity rolls out, and it still didn't have a place for everybody.
Right.
And I don't think any state has found a way, maybe Oklahoma, because it's a free market, but I don't think anyone has found a way to make social equity truly equitable.
Right.
Um, and that's like where I am in my journey now, right? Is trying to be a voice for social equity. What does that look like? What do we want it to look like? I really want to change the term because I hate the term social equity. It's just become a catchphrase for all.
Right.
Um,
Already
and
know.
I would first like to work on changing the term. since everybody has such a hard time defining it. Maybe if we change the term and figured out what we really want from this thing and call it what we want. And then we can take the power and control the narrative. But
Right.
right now, social equity is just all over the place. It's anything and it's everything. And,
Right.
you know, it's triggering,
Yeah.
honestly.
Listen, because we've seen this play out so many times for Black people, where things have been built on our back and we do not get our just due. We don't get our 40 acres and a mule. And y'all come up with these so-called programs and terms and, you know, um, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And you don't let us tell you what to do. We know what's best for
Or
us.
even what we need,
We
right?
we don't
Listen to
need
me.
babysitters. That's number one. We're the oldest people on the planet. Trust and believe, mothers and fathers of civilization. We know how to build. We built this place, our ancestors, that everybody else is enjoying but us. So at the end of the day, yes, I agree. Enough is enough with everybody, or everything for us has to be for everybody. Like I said and stated before, stop being afraid to support and invest in Black women. Why?
There's
Because
nothing wrong with it.
we
You have
cover all
Italian
bases.
heritage communities, you have Jewish community centers, and no one says, what is that? We have to start supporting each other. We have to start creating our ecosystem. And there's nothing wrong with it. There is nothing wrong with it. And society is going to tell you that it's wrong because that's how they keep us down,
No,
right?
this is why this
The
platform.
minute we start to figure out how to cooperate with each other, right? Everything else comes together. You
That's
can't
it.
hold me down anymore. I'm elevated now because now I understand I can't do everything by myself. I have to work with somebody else. And that's key to everything. And there's nothing wrong with us supporting our own. There is nothing wrong with me saying, I want to buy cannabis that was cultivated by a Black woman. There's nothing wrong with that. There
Facts.
is nothing wrong with that.
He knows my body.
I think you should be intentional when you're out here spending your Black dollar and making sure that that Black dollar circulates in the Black business community. We have to be intentional because our dollar does not circulate within our Black business community the way that it circulates around the rest of society.
So we
And
need
so,
more
yes,
Black
we
women.
have to be intentional, and there's nothing wrong with that. When a Jewish family gets up in Brooklyn and they want to go get lox and bagels, nobody looks down at them if they want to go to the Jewish deli.
Mhm.
Nobody looks down at them.
No.
That is nobody even thinks about it. But if we start talking about supporting our own, it becomes an issue. And that's your issue. It's not my issue because I'm going to support mine.
Best way I can if I can find y'all. If
That's right.
I find y'all,
That's right.
and the way that we're gonna find each other is we have to supply our own needs. We have to meet our needs. I can only speak from the perspective of a Black woman because that's what I am. And so I'm going to resonate with a Black woman. We don't have to grow up in the same geographical area to know and be able to understand the experiences of what all of us have gone through within our community and having to deal with outside of our community. So the point is that when you invest and support Black women, my point is that we cover everyone. We don't just focus on Black women. Our needs meets everybody's needs. Okay? And the reason why this country and this globe is in the state it is in is because we are ignored. Okay? We are mistreated. You cannot ignore your mother. Okay? That it is what it is. And some people may get triggered or be offended, and that's for you. Like you said, that is not my issue. What I'm saying is we deserve equity. And it's okay that I want to make sure that my needs are met first and the needs of my children are met first before I meet everyone else's. Okay? That it's okay to
That's
say
real leadership, right?
thank you.
Because how can you as a leader give to anybody anything that you don't have?
Hmm.
How can you mentor an experience that you never had? How can you tell somebody to overcome something that you never overcome? And you can't get to these places if you haven't put into you, if you haven't taken care of you. And so,
And that's
you
on the
know,
micro level and the macro level. So this is
absolutely.
about self-care within ourselves, but also in the community and the globe at large. We
Yes.
okay, we know what that is. So if our community has needs, you need to come to us because we're the ones keeping the communities together.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, it like I said, we have to figure out a way, you know, to Connecticut, we're coming online. It's wonderful. New York's coming online. It's wonderful. Jersey's coming online. Wonderful. We have all these new states coming online. And those are all new opportunities for all people of color in any state, right? So not just social equity operators in Connecticut or BIPOC business owners in Connecticut. I mean, in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, wherever you at, we have to find a way to connect and work with each other. We have to find a way to support each other, because the minute that we do that, everybody else will do it, right? Just like hip hop. We sitting here right now today and all year, what they've been talking about, the 50th year of hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, what did they say about hip hop?
Right.
35 years ago, the Supreme Court was taking Uncle Luke
Mm.
to trial, you know, right? Hip hop was a menace, and now you can't sell butter without a rap song. And
Okay.
so, you know, and we supported rap culture, right? We supported the hip hop culture. We wouldn't let anybody tell us that our music was wrong, our culture was wrong. We held strong to it. And
Mm-hmm.
we have to do the same thing when it comes to supporting each other. Don't let anybody tell you that that's wrong. Stand strong, stand what they say, 10 toes down. Stand 10 toes down on it. Like, I'm supporting my brothers and my sisters, period.
Right.
And don't feel bad about it. You know, be very intentional about those decisions, because they do affect the way the Black economy operates, right? When I have a decision of whether I'm going to go to, I could go in the dispensary. There's 12 shelves. There's only 2 Black products in the whole dispensary. Why would I not intentionally buy the 2 Black products that's in the dispensary?
Mm-hmm.
We have to do it. Like, we have to be that intentional these days. I have a love of bag and shoes. I love bags. I love shoes. During COVID, there was a rise of the Telfar bag. And when I found out that that was a Black man making that bag, it's the only bag I carry now. I don't carry Coach anymore. I don't carry Louis Vuitton bags. I don't carry Gucci bag. I carry Telfar.
Right.
And I'm very intentional
Why?
about it.
Because
I
we
I
need
can
the support. We need the support. We need
absolutely.
the
And now all the little Black girls is carrying Telfar bags. Everybody got a Telfeezy now. And
Mhm.
I'm not mad at it. That's the way it's
Right.
supposed to be. That's
Right.
the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
And if we do it, everybody else does it. And that's what we have to really sear in our
We
minds.
have to
And so if we're
you are.
intentional
Mhm.
about supporting Black business, guess what? Everybody else to do it. Everybody else to
Why
glom
am
on,
I not
because
going to support my son and daughter? Like this is what I'm going to support. This is how we build legacy. Okay. That is where the generational and regenerational wealth happens. You do
yes.
not spend outside of you. You meet your own needs first and you support your children or your brother or your sister or your mom or whoever. But when I see other, especially the young ones now, even though I'm not that old, but those that are younger than me, you know, becoming entrepreneurs and, opening businesses to support our needs and things like that. Yes, we have to be intentional about that in and out of this space. See, the one thing I'm not, like you said, I'm an advocate in and out of cannabis, okay, for a plethora of other things. For me, my advocacy started when I was born because I'm a Black woman or a Black girl, period. I had to advocate for myself growing up New York City project. So that's it. But even as an adult, advocating with the like you said, the choices in clothes I wear, how I wear my hair, you know, the products that I use, all of those things, being intentional about my care and self-care, and that creates the immunity that our community needs. That's the immunity in community, okay?
Yes.
Is, you know, going taking care of self. Okay, so and with that said, you know, your Black Wall Streets, being at these places, these pop-ups and all of that, making sure that we're, you know, even in the cannabis space, way to that's a way that we normalize it by stepping outside of the bubble.
Stepping out and going into the mainstream,
Right.
and hey, I'm here, let's talk about this.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Abso-freaking-lutely, because